On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Ian Amit. He is the Chief Security Officer at Cimpress. We're going to be covering a very unique challenge that he faces as the Chief Security Officer. He actually manages security for 14 different business units. And we're going to talk about some of the challenges that come with that and how that actually helps, impacts, and the growth of Cimpress. Ian, thanks for being on and talking about this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Amir.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned in the quick intro there, Cimpress, 14 business units. Give us a little setup of what Cimpress does and why there's 14 different business units so we can kind of peel that back a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. And it's okay if people don't immediately identify Cimpress. We know it's not a very common brand, but Cimpress essentially operates in the mass customization market. The more familiar brands that you might have heard about are Vistaprint, which is our largest business. We've got National Pen, Build a Sign, Pixar Printing, Vermaak and Rock. It's all sorts of businesses all around the world that really focus on that mass customization concept, which is producing promotional products, marketing products with the prices that a mass production allows you to get, which means lowering the prices while being able to customize them and personalize them even in small quantities, so that you can print out 5 t-shirts and not pay like $50 per t-shirt, which you would typically do just for the setup and all of that stuff, but you still pay kind of mass production costs. So that's, again, the very high level gist of it. We do have different businesses around the world because those businesses address either different markets geographically, regionally. They target different audiences from consumers through small businesses, micro businesses, large businesses. Some of them tend to cater more for designers and design professionals, while others cater more for the more layperson that just wants to get some marketing and promotional material done. And that's how we came up to be such a wide assembly of different businesses all over the world. And we're happily considered probably the leading mass customization vendor out there.
Those are some fantastic brands, and I'm sure people have identified with a couple of those at least. And now we know Cimpress is the actual holding company for those brands. And there's a lot of brands there, right? So, you just rattled off some pretty well-known entities and probably some decent traffic. I think we talked about 14 different businesses that are running independently, and your responsibility is security across those 14. So I think most people are responsible for one brand, maybe 2, 14.
Yeah.
Some unique challenges, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And again, the way that we're operating, we're a highly decentralized company. We're trying to allow each business to be as autonomous as possible. And that's a very conscious decision in order to retain each business's uniqueness, to retain their agility, their ability to innovate and move fast without being part of kind of a big conglomerate that might slow them down. We have internally this analogy of a manatee and piranhas. So we want to be this pack of piranhas that go in a general direction, but are very agile, and each one is individually kind of aggressive and nimble and quick. We don't want to be the manatee. It was like sluggish and slow to respond. Running security for this, on one hand, all of our businesses operate in the same ecosystem, all right? We're all e-commerce. We're all tech companies in our nature. We all need to deal with some sort of production or manufacturing because at the end of the day, we're producing products. So we do have a common set or a common thread of security needs across the businesses. However, this is where the fun starts. As I mentioned before, highly decentralized. Each business picks its own tech stack. Each business operates in a different manner, caters for a different geography or market, sometimes have a different set of supply chain. So that's really the challenge from a security perspective and why I really love doing this, which is trying to understand and cater for all of those businesses. They're in different sizes. Vistaprint is by far our largest one, but our smallest one is about 50 people as compared to Vistaprint, that have thousands of people in their employment. The way that I'm approaching this is, first of all, understanding, again, the manatee and piranhas. There's no way that we can provide kind of a one-size-fits-all security solution. And trying to force or kind of descent on the businesses and say, thou shalt do this, and that, and kind of lock things down, not going to work. And I would be remiss if I would get to that point of trying to enforce it. The path that we took in Simpra Security to cater and to address security for all those businesses was, I have to say, pretty simple one. And we figured, you know what, let's understand what are the core concepts or the core requirements that the businesses would typically have. And let's start offering those things as products or services internally. So we've actually set up a sort of an internal MSSP, a managed services security provider. And we have a set, like an actual menu of different products and services that we can offer to them. It reduces the overhead for the business to start trying to understand what is security and how to address it and how to evaluate different products. We're not expecting them to be security experts. We want to really provide just the essence of it and enable them to run fast and be the piranhas that they are. So we did end up creating this internal MSSP model. On one hand, it allows us to be highly competitive because we do have the purchasing power of Simpris and the 14 businesses under it. And the businesses get those products and services delivered by us, the security experts. My teams are highly service-oriented these days and treat each business as a unique customer with their own needs, catered for their own size. So again, that was kind of our approach to, how do we tackle this 14 businesses question? And that divide and conquer approach really seems to serve us well in the 3 years that I've been here.
I guess let me ask you this then. So you mentioned that everybody's fairly autonomous. How does that look in terms of alignment? I get there's an internal, managed service provider and you allow them to pick and choose what they need, but you need to obviously understand their requirements, their roadmap of 14 different autonomous, decentralized entities. How does that look?
So what we do is we measure the businesses based on several criteria, several sets of frameworks. We start off with a simple framework, which is called the NIST CSF, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. That allows us to get let's call it tactical view of what is the maturity level across a set of categories that NIST CSF defines for each one of those businesses. It's fairly easy to provide a business with that questionnaire and say, all right, here's your cybersecurity capabilities from a defensive perspective, split up to 5 major categories, and each category is then broken down to subcategories with a simple rating of 1 to 4 from a maturity perspective. What is your level of maturity? Distribute that between 14 businesses, and you get a pretty quick and clear picture of where do they stand tactically. And it's okay to be a 1, it's okay to be a 4, there's no blaming or anything like that. So that allows us to understand, first of all, it allows us to understand, is there a systematic theme that we can see across the businesses, right? Using that, I can say, all right, we probably need this service or this product that will address the systematic lack of capability or lack of maturity across the different businesses. Additionally, what it does is it allows us to look at each business by itself and say, all right, business A, this is your operating model, this is the markets that you're addressing, this is your competitive landscape. Let's look at where do you stand from a tactical perspective and work with you to figure out. And really, we're sitting with each and one of those different businesses. I've created a customer success program inside of Simpra Security that, again, sits down with the customers and looks at their scores and with them try to kind of prioritize and say, all right, what do we think? And the key is really the we. It's working together, us as security experts advising the business and the business as kind of the overall risk owner. What do you think that we should be addressing? Where do we figure out that you need more capabilities and maturity? That's really one of the key areas that we're using to work with the businesses. A complementary approach that we're taking is much more of a top-down one. So if NIST CSF is sort of tactical, really granular from a security maturity of different, very specific capabilities, we want to complement that with a top-down, what is the business risk? So we're using a different framework called FAIR, that's Factor Analysis of Information Risk, that quantifies risk using business scenarios, right? So this happens and causes that, and eventually there is a loss event. That loss is then quantified in simple terms, in dollars. And that enables us to, again, work with each and every business, ask them, what are your top 5 loss scenarios? From a business perspective, we work with the CFOs, with the CEOs, with the CTOs. They all, can pretty quickly give us that answer. And based on that answer, we run some analytics. We work with the businesses to figure out what is the quantified risk, what's the quantified loss for each one of those scenarios. And that gives us additional perspective and prioritization, because then we can marry the tactical measurements that we did before with the loss scenario and say, you know what, this loss scenario, some of the causes or some of the elements that contribute to it is the fact that there's a shortage or kind of something in a control or a process is less mature. And it also allows us to tie it back to that specific capability and its maturity level and say, all right, if we address this, if we enhance this process or provide some more controls or do something to address it, increase the maturity level, it would have an impact on my loss exposure, my expected losses. And through that, we can tie it back to business terms. We can go back to the business and say, first of all, are you comfortable with these kind of expected losses? Second of all, if you're not, all right, let's figure out ways to manage that loss, to reduce that loss to a level where you would find it as a business acceptable. We're not expecting to eliminate the loss. We're not expecting to zero out the cost. It's part of doing business. But we are trying to provide ways for the business to turn security into something that is really business focused and that means something to them. And using those 2 programs, we, again, over the past couple of years, really proven that this is highly effective. We're tracking change over time across the businesses from a maturity perspective and from an expected losses perspective. And we're seeing how it really impacts both the culture of the business as well as their ability to keep moving forward while having the confidence that they are managing the risk, they're cognizant of the risks that they're taking. We're actually encouraging them to essentially take risks as part of their operations while controlling it and being very aware of where do they stand from a tactical perspective of their capabilities.
Interesting. I mean, it sounds like you guys, as the managed service provider, definitely a consulting engagement to the 14 different brands and a whole different paradigm versus like a true internal risk team. I was actually just thinking, like, let's say you guys add brand 15. How long does it take to onboard that brand within this security framework to make sure that they're ready to go? Is this days, weeks, months?
It really depends on the size. And we actually did have a recent acquisition that we've completed. We've recently acquired 99 Designs that's going to be folded into Vistaprint and complement it with its capabilities. Part of the due diligence process of M&As also involves security, obviously, and it allows us to get a head start on a potential acquisition and know not exactly, but to a fairly good degree, where does that business stand from its maturity perspective? What are the overall high-level risks? So we do get sort of a head start. As I said before, it really depends on the size of the business and the type of its operations, but I would say it's probably in the lower month. We do want to make sure that there's a kind of a smooth onboarding and we don't want to make too big of a changes. So the initial process is mostly on the measurement side, on the calibration and understanding, all right, let's figure out where do you stand across those different frameworks and metrics. And once we do that, obviously, if there's any glaring gaps or something that immediately needs to be addressed, we do that. But once we get a good picture, we just create a roadmap for those businesses to onboard on whatever services and products we offer that are suitable for their position. And within a month, typically, we can get a business up to speed from a security perspective.
I guess final question on this is how, I guess when you guys are going into the M&As and obviously Cimpress management, they're looking at what you've done. How much of a competitive advantage is that going and selling this to the next brand, the next company? It's like, hey, listen, we have security dialed in and it takes it off their plate. I mean, is that a competitive advantage when you guys are going for acquisition?
I don't know if, again, being totally honest, I don't know if the fact that we do security okay is something that would attract potential M&As. I think that what it
I think security, okay, you're modest. I do appreciate that though, but
or that we can offset that from the business.
there you go.
I can see that as like, oh, cool, we don't have to worry about that. Or at least we have someone else to share the pain with. Might be a concern, but I don't think that's a big thing. I think that the part that plays or that has a higher weight here is the Cimpress brand itself. Our overall brand as a company that is, on one hand, operates in a highly decentralized manner, allows the businesses to retain their brand and actually enhance it and not kind of, wipe it away and gobble them into this big conglomerate. I think that's really what plays the bigger part in being an attractive partner for an M&A rather than, what we do with our fancy security stuff.
I love it, man. Thanks for taking the time to chat. We will include your LinkedIn. So if anyone has any questions, they can follow up and reach out and kind of talk to you about anything you spoke on the podcast about.
Phenomenal. Thank you.
Absolutely. So that's it for this episode. We'll be back again with another episode, and hopefully you guys are enjoying and subscribing. That's really the key here. The podcast has been growing, so appreciate all that you guys have done. And also keep sending me the topic requests. I know I'm getting different ideas of potential next topics, and I've got to go find the right guests to kind of get those questions answered. But I really appreciate it. Until next time, thanks.